What's up, peoples? This is Skrillex. I'm in Multiplier, and today what I thought I'd do is show you how to make the perfect saw lead in Native Instruments Massive. To put out a track called Fuck by Fruit, and got completely inundated with about 2 requests for a tutorial, basically showing you how to make that lead sound. So I thought I'd show you how I got and did it. And yeah, it's one of the lead sounds I made for a sample pack of trap presets, which went out on Loopmasters' own label. And there's probably a link below if I've copy and pasted it. And yeah, so if you want the lead kind of preset, grab it from the sample pack in the link below. But yeah, I'm going to show you how I made it anyway, just because it shows you some of the basic kind of synthesizing lead preset concepts and ting. Kind of runs through all the basic ideas you need when you're making sound, so it's quite a good example. And yeah, I call it more than squaw because it's kind of a square and a saw, but there's a little bit more rhyme. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So first of all, I'm going to need a copy of Massive to make this, because it uses Massive. If you don't have Massive and you have FM8, you're going to need a different synth. Yeah, but first of all, like I always say in these videos, go over to the oscillator tab, which is this dude over here, and you're going to click the restart via gate button, which is this guy. If you don't know what it does, click it. If you do know what it does, you'll know whether or not you want to click it or not. Look it up in the manual. It's quite hard to explain kind of exactly what it does. It's kind of all to do with physics and kind of the details about how sounds are synthesized. But yeah, just click it if you can't be bothered with that stuff because you're too busy making fat beats. So click that button, and now we're going to get onto the crucial stuff. So first of all, we're going to go to the voicing tab, a commonly overlooked tab from massive newbies, but it's super integral. And basically the idea is this unisono number down here, this determines how many instances of each of these voices on each of these 3 oscillators actually comes out. So by default it's on 1, but you want to move it to 2. So just to quickly show you kind of before and after. In fact, I haven't even shown you what the sound sounds like yet, so yeah, here's the sort of noise I'm talking about. Pretty rad. Anyway, back to the tutorial. So yeah, before you kind of, if you just add 1 instance, it sounds a bit like this. And then with 2, pretty cool, except you may notice, unless you set up these kind of unisono spreads and unisono spreads and the pan position like this, you won't get the same effect. So what's going on with this? The pitch cutoff, once you turn this on, by default the slider's like over here. If you then move it over here, then what that's doing is you got basically 2 voices happening, because this unisono number is 2. And then this slider is determining how detuned each voice is relative to each other. So by turning this on and moving this move it slideways, pretty cool, pun, it basically detunes each voice, which kind of gives it this kind of cool effect, which when you then combine it with turning the pan position on and moving this slider to here, it might normally be defaulted in the middle maybe, it means that one sound's coming out of one ear, one sound's coming out of the other. And then because they're slightly detuned, it tricks your brain into thinking it's a wide sound, and that's how you get wide sounds. So yeah, that's definitely worth doing. Best thing to do is just to play about with these settings. I'll have a quick play now just to show you. So just kind of watch my mouse. So yeah, fundamentally, the kind of keys to getting your sound wide is in this voicing tab, and I've just kind of explained why you need the settings kind of like you do. But yeah, that's kind of, so we've got kind of a wide sound. Next thing we're going to want to do is probably, if you've done file new sound, and you've got the latest version Massive, the Vibrato kind of macro is already going to be set up for you. But if you haven't got the latest version Massive, if you go over to the oscillator tab and then go to this kind of rate and the depth down here, that controls the vibrato, and that's kind of the wobbliness of the sound. So this kind of oscillates the frequency just a little bit, and that's what gives it that kind of that effect. So if I kind of play with this vibrato knob, it will kind of demonstrate kind of what it's doing. And vibrato is like a super fundamental concept with lead sounds. Even if it's not kind of used super kind of aggressively as an effect, you pretty much always want a little bit of it there, just as a subtle thing. Just gives it a little bit of movement, a little bit of kind of, it gives the sustained bit of the note a bit of kind of movement and a bit of variation, because otherwise your sound sounds a bit kind of straight and a bit boring. So always going to want a little bit of vibrato there. So we've got our voicing done, we've got our sound wide, we've got it detuned a bit, it's all part of the widening. We've got our vibrato. The next fundamental kind of concept in making lead sounds is the kind of the attack. And the attack is the kind of like the front bit of the sound, and you can almost do anything you want with the attack, but you need to do something. That's kind of the key bit. And you can make the attack long or short, or you can do whatever you want, but what you'll normally find is you want to at least do something with the pitch in the attack. Now whether or not you use it kind of aggressively as an effect or kind of really subtly is just kind of something to separate the attack of the sound from the release, or not the release, the sustain, is up to you. But you do want something happening in the attack that makes the sound different to the sustain section. The sustain section being the bit of the note that happens when you just keep holding it forever. And the reason you need something different in the attack is because fundamentally, if you're playing like a lead melody, you need to give the listener some clues as to when each note starts, kind of on top of it just being the frequency change. Because it's all about, especially if you've got kind of like a lot going on in your mix, or you've got heavily compressed or limited it can be quite hard sometimes if you don't have anything happening in the attack for someone to kind of distinguish each note, especially if the notes are really close to each other, and then they can't hear the melody properly, and then they start crying. So you do need something cool happening in the attack. So you see here we've got the number. If you follow the mouse now, circle effect. Oh, that was like a meta comment. You can see that I've routed, depending on where you're living, the number 1 envelope to the pitch. So if we go to the number 1 envelope, do a click, we can see what's going on. So we can see the attack is kind of going up, and we can control the time for that attack. But if you then think about what that's doing to the pitch here, it means kind of as you press the note, it pulls the pitch up 12 semitones, which happens to be 1 octave, which wasn't a coincidence. It's just a cool thing to do and makes a lot of sense. So kind of how you set up this envelope, whether you set it up kind of like this sort of shape, or whether you do say one of kind of these guys, one of these guys, is kind of up to you. But then also you'll notice I mapped one of the macro knobs, the second macro knob, to the attack. And that just means that I can then control the rise length, kind of the length of that attack section, kind of as and when I want, either with a MIDI controller or kind of just with a mouse, or I can automate it or do whatever I like. So you can see as I kind of, in a sec I'll give you a go, you can see as I kind of pull the knob around how it affects the attack length and kind of how long that kind of pitch up thing actually goes on for. Which is pretty cool, but I find especially if you're doing some kind of proper MIDI line, you don't want that bit too long, but I just made it a bit longer for the jokes. Cool, so we've got something going on with our attack. Another quick little tip, I didn't particularly do it in this sound, but it can be quite useful just to map this kind of, the same envelope you use for the pitch, to some other things, whether it's the wavetable position, or just something else, almost semi-randomly whack it on stuff just to kind of give the attack a bit of interest and make it a bit different until it sounds cool. But it's worth kind of mapping it to every oscillator you end up using as well, and we'll get to oscillator 3 in a second. Cool, so we got our few fundamentals down. We got sound sounding wide, we got some vibrato, we've got something happening in the attack bit. The next thing we're going to want to check is in the voicing tab again. So click voicing. It's spelled voicing. Just to give you a clue, is what's going on with all these complicated words down here with trigger and stuff. So it's a bit tricky to explain, but I'll give it a go. You've got 3 different modes here: polyphon, monophon, and monorotate. Now I'm going to ignore the difference between monophon and monorotate for now, because that's a bit more subtle. But polyphon means it basically allows you to press basically allows you to trigger multiple voices at the same time. So in reality, what that means is you could press multiple notes on the keyboard at the same time, whereas monophon would allow you to press only one kind of note on the keyboard at the same time. Now it gets a bit more complicated when you have more than one voice happening at the same time, but let's just simplify it and let's just say polyphon allows you to press multiple keys at the same time. Like let's say you're doing a chord, and monophon is just one note at a time. So for lead sounds especially, you're pretty much always going to want monophon, but I personally prefer monorotate. Look it up in the manual if you want to know the actual difference, because it's quite subtle, but they do a good job of explaining it. And they also do a good job of explaining the difference between these trigger modes, because again, it's a little bit kind of hard to explain, and it's probably worth doing a whole video on it. It's that kind of subtle. But then these things, if you just want like a nice default setting for lead sounds, choose monorotate. The default is polyphon, but choose monorotate, and then always. And then the oscillator tab, this time down here determines the amount of time it takes for it to slide from one note to another. So just leave it in the middle and then set it as equal. There's some kind of good default settings. I know that's probably not that helpful, but it's probably worth a whole video because it would take 10 minutes or so to explain exactly how it all works. It's quite complicated. It's not that complicated, it's just kind of quite a lot of explaining and kind of understanding of how the synthesis works. So cool. Quick Corona break. That's tasty. Right, okay, cool. I got a text message. No, I got a Twitter message. Whatever. Anyway, back to Massive. Right, so we got some of the basics down. The next few bits of the basics is this dimension expander effect. So it's not necessarily a fundamental of synthesis, but especially if you've got Massive, dimension expander does a really good job. So you can treat it almost like a really short delay, or not short delay, short decay reverb, almost like a room reverb. And it just gives your sound a bit of space, makes it sound a bit bigger. It's got some dimension to it. It's just kind of a good idea to make your sound a bit thicker, a bit more full. And again, I've mapped one of the macro knobs, in this case number 7, to the size, just so it gives me something to kind of mess about with, to kind of dial in my sound. When you get the knob more near the far right, it ends up being more of a kind of echoey type effect, kind of really like a more noticeable effect, whereas in the middle, it just makes the sound better. And then reverb, the final little fundamental. I missed one of the main fundamentals, but second to last fundamental is reverb. You're going to want a bit of reverb, even if it's subtle. Again, it just gives it some bigger space. So it's almost like the dimension expander gives the sound like some dimension, and then the reverb puts that sound in an actual room, in an actual environment. So short decay reverb kind of gives it kind of some dimension, makes it like an actual shape almost, and then the actual reverb, kind of like the longer delay or longer decay, I keep saying the wrong word, longer decay reverb actually puts it in its own environment. That's kind of what reverb does, and that's what makes your sound quote unquote big. And then I've just mapped some of these macro knobs to some of the settings, because it's depends on the track, kind of what sort of vibe you want with the reverb. And I should have said this earlier on, but another kind of thing we should have set up was like a fundamental of making a sound is the main envelope of the sound, and that's on the 4th envelope, which is here. And then you know it's the 4th envelope because if you go over to the amp mod, which is short for ampliton modulon, not really, short for amplitude modulation. I've forgotten what I was going to say. Yeah, so that kind of shows you that the 4th envelope is mapped to the amplitude of the main wave, which is cool. So you can see, depending on which version of Massive you have and whether or not you opened up a fresh instance or went file new sound, your default kind of like envelope for the amplitude might look like this, which is what you want, or it might look different. But it's worth kind of having to play about with it. Depends on your track, kind of what sort of shape you want. I mean, for me, this made the most sense, but if I just play around with some of these settings, you'll see the kind of difference it makes. So you see, when you start to play around these, you kind of end up playing with the kind of the attack, the decay, the sustain level, the release, all that kind of stuff. It's reasonably self-explanatory. The wave basically does whatever shape you have it set out. Cool. It's definitely quite a long video, but you know what? It's covering all the basics, and it is called How to Make the Perfect Saw, not How to Make the Perfect Saw without actually telling you how it works. That sentence made no sense. Whatever. Anyway, let's do it. So we've got the basics down. Now I called this particular preset more than score because it does a little bit more than that. Because it can be nice just to not just make a very basic saw sound, but to give it a bit more character just by introducing a few more kind of elements of complexity to it. Because you want your track and your preset to sound kind of slightly original, right? Don't all want to sound the same. So what I've done is two main things to kind of give the sound a bit more character. The first is I mapped a macro knob to the wavetable position here. So basically, if you don't know much about Massive, the wavetable position basically determines the shape of the wave you actually chose. So by default, it's on square saw. I probably should have said that right at the beginning. But yeah, you want your voice to be square saw. And then when the knob is on the right, it's saw, because you see it says square dash saw. And when the knob is on the left, it's square. And then when you kind of drag the knob around, it kind of varies between square and saw. So by mapping a macro knob to it, oh no, what did I press? I pressed the button. It's back, don't worry. By kind of mapping the macro knob around it, that allows us to vary between square and saw. So by default, I kind of mapped it to be, so you can see down the macro knob 3 down here, it's on the far right, which means it's saw, but then as I kind of pull it around, it goes to square, as I will show you. Oops, no, pressed the wrong button. Wait. Timbre, right. Nope, click. Pretty cool. I called it Timbre 1 just because it gives it a bit of like proper musical sounding name, makes me sound more legit. And then after that, what I did is, you see I've turned on Oscillator 3, which is another kind of waveform type thing. And then I chose a different voice, in this case, Additive Mix 3, just basically choose them randomly until it sounds cool. And then I made sure I mapped the kind of the pitch attack envelope thing to be the same as for Oscillator 1. And then I basically, by varying macro knob 4, you can see it pulls a varying amount of this kind of position in, this kind of voice in. So we'll see as I kind of change macro knob 4 how that actually affects the sound. Rad. Right, anyway, that's pretty much it really. I think I've covered all the various elements of it. Covered all the basics. Just to recap, we got should have done this bit right at the beginning, but the 4th envelope determines the kind of the main shape of the wave. We got to make sure we're getting that set up how we like. Again, there's no right or wrongs. That's really particular to your particular track. In the voicing tab, that determines how wide the sound is. If we're not using the voicing tab properly, our sound will always sound a bit stupid. Not stupid, just a bit non-professional or non-big and full or whatever. However else you want to describe it, it won't sound as good. Just kind of copy these settings if you don't want to learn the details, but it's worth learning the details just so you kind of know how it all works. So we've got a voicing to get it kind of wide. We also did a bit of voicing to determine I'm not even going to bother explaining it. But yeah, setup, mono, rotate, and trigger always. And then we got, what else did we do after that? We did used envelope 1 to determine the kind of the pitch kind of attack thing, the pitch rise thing. Pitch 4 would be fine as well, but whatever works. During the attack bit of the sound, just to give the attack bit a bit of kind of significance and make it a bit more interesting and make it more noticeable when a new note starts. Then we also got some vibrato going on, just so that we make the sustain bit of the sound interesting, and just better. And then what did we do as well? We gone and done a bit of dimension expanding, awesome little effect in Massive. If you're not using Massive, Steve Duda on Zephyr Records website put out that as an effect, a free VST by itself, so you can get that particular effect just as a standalone kind of plugin. Check out my video, my favorite free plugin, for kind of more info on it. And then we got some reverb going on, and that's pretty much it. Sorted. Slightly long video, but you know what? There's a lot to cover when you want to make a sound quote unquote perfect. And you know what? I think it's perfect. Yeah, and just to reiterate, if you want the preset, either use what I've said to make it yourself, or hop on the link below and buy it so I earn a bit of money, because that's where I earn a lot of my money, and I need money for food. And if not, I'll be living on the street, and then the quality of my videos will go down a lot, and then it's all your fault. So yeah, I'm in Multiplier. This has been a video ting, and yeah, 22 minutes. Boom. Enjoy making sounds and stuff. And again, if you buy my sample pack, it's called More Than Squaw, which not only rhymes, it's kind of explanatory. Sweet.